Dearest listener, step into Elderbury Manor's glass house of secrets with me. I'm your guide through the thorns, every twist freshly clipped, every revelation fragrant with danger. If you've ever suspected that the quietest gardens hide the sharpest blades, this is your story. Subscribe now and never miss a petal drop. New chapters bloom weekly. Yours in Suspense, the gardener of mysteries. Imagine a single crimson petal caught in a greenhouse vent, a throat slashed by garden shears, and a village spinster who sees murder where Scotland Yard sees suicide. Welcome to Miss Marple, murder by bloody secateurs in the greenhouse. 5 chapters of orchids, blackmail, and blood-soaked legacy delivered straight to your ears. Ready to prune the truth? Hit play, if you dare. Chapter 1. The crimson stain on the orchid bench. The train from St. Mary Mead rattled to a halt at Chipping Elderbury with the resigned sigh of an old dog. Miss Jane Marple stepped onto the platform, parasol tucked beneath one arm, the other hand steadying a small wicker basket lined with lavender tissue. Inside nestled a single pot of African violets, her excuse for the visit, though invitations from Lady Letitia Harrow were never about the flowers. They were about the people who tended them and the secrets that grew faster than any weed. A liveried chauffeur waited beside the manor's Daimler, cap peaked like a raven's wing. He touched the brim in greeting. "Morning, miss. Her ladyship's expecting you for luncheon, but there's been an upset." His voice dropped to the hush reserved for funerals and tax audits. "Mr. Harrow, the gardener, that is, he's been found." "Found?" Miss Marple repeated, the word light on her tongue, testing its weight. "Dead, miss, in the big glass house, throat opened like a bloom gone wrong." The Daimler purred along lanes hemmed by hawthorn and late foxgloves, the countryside flashing past in watercolour greens. Miss Marple watched hedgerows blur, her mind already pruning possibilities. Reginald Harrow had been head gardener at Elderbury Manor for 33 years. His hands had coaxed orchids from air thick enough to chew. Men like that did not simply mislay their lives among the potting compost. The manor rose ahead, a confection of Tudor brick and Victorian folly, chimneys pricking a sky the colour of pewter. Ivy clung to the south wing like gossip to a village shop. As the car swept beneath the porte-cochere, the front doors flew open and Lady Letitia descended the steps in a rustle of bombazine and indignation. "Jane, thank heavens!" She seized Miss Marple's gloved hands. "It's ghastly, positively medieval. The police are trampling my phalaenopsis as we speak." "Take me to the greenhouse," Miss Marple said, calm as milk. "Details curdle if left too long." They crossed the terrace where stone urns spilled geraniums the shade of arterial blood. Beyond lay the kitchen gardens, then the orchard, and finally the greenhouse itself. An iron-ribbed cathedral of glass, panes misted with the breath of 1,000 plants. Heat rolled out as the door opened, humid and fragrant, laced with the metallic tang of blood. Constable Pork stood just inside, helmet tucked beneath his arm, face the colour of uncooked sweet. "Begging your pardon, ladies, but it's not fit." "Nonsense," Lady Letitia snapped. "Jane has seen worse in the war." Miss Marple had seen worse in the village hall during a particularly contentious bring-and-buy sale, but she kept the observation to herself. She stepped past the constable into the central aisle. The body lay half-sprawled across the orchid bench, one arm flung wide as if reaching for a phantom bloom. Reginald Harrow's eyes stared at the glass roof, reflecting fractured sky. His throat had been sliced ear to ear, a second red smile beneath the first. The secateurs, His own. She recognized the worn beechwood handles, rested in his right hand, blade crusted dark. Blood had sheeted across the slate, pooling around the shattered remains of a terracotta pot. From the wreckage protruded the broken stem of a cattleya, its lips splashed scarlet. "Time of death?" Miss Marple asked. The police surgeon, Dr. Moss, knelt nearby, snapping shut his bag. "Between 6 and 7 this morning, rigours just setting in the jaw." Lady Letitia pressed a lace handkerchief to her lips. "He was alive at 5:30. I saw him from my window, pruning the vanda. He waved." Miss Marple's gaze travelled the aisle. Footprints, several sets, crisscrossed the damp floor, but one stood apart. A partial print in blood, heel deep, toes light, as though someone had pivoted sharply. The tread pattern suggested a woman's court shoe, narrow, expensive. She filed it away. Above the body, the ventilation pane stood ajar. A breeze stirred the hanging tillandsias, setting them spinning like tiny green propellers. Something caught the light, a single petal, ivory with a cerise throat, clinging to the lip of a ventilation slit 6 feet up. Impossible for it to have fallen there naturally. "Constable," she said softly, "might I borrow your truncheon a moment?" Polk hesitated, then handed it over. Miss Marple extended the baton, hooking the petal free. It fluttered down into her palm, edges already browning. Cattleya elderberriensis, the Manor's prize hybrid, unveiled at Chelsea only last year. Worth a baronet's ransom, and rumoured stolen from a Brazilian expedition under circumstances that had never been fully explained. Lady Letitia's breath hitched. "That's Reggie's masterpiece. He kept the only mature specimen in this house." "Kept?" Miss Marple echoed. "Someone cut the bloom 2 nights ago. Reggie was livid, threatened to resign, said he'd find the thief if he had to dig up every border." The constable cleared his throat. "We'll need statements from the household, your ladyship, and the undergardeners. Young Mr. Finch was seen arguing with the deceased yesterday." "Tom Finch." Lady Letitia's voice sharpened. "He's been with us since he was 14. Reggie treated him like a son." "Sons quarrel," Miss Marple murmured. She knelt, mindful of her skirt, and examined the secateurs. The blade was nicked near the pivot, a fresh gouge. She turned the handles, engraved on the left, RH 1923. On the right, someone had scratched newer initials, shallow but deliberate, EV. "Curious," she said. Dr. Moss followed her gaze. "Suicide, plain as day. Man holds the shears backwards, pulls across his own throat. I've seen it in despair cases." Miss Marple tilted her head. "Yet the angle is wrong for a right-handed man to cut left to right with such force, and the arterial spray." She indicated the bench behind the body, where blood had arced in a perfect fan, undisturbed. Whoever stood here faced him. The killer was taller, or Harrow was already kneeling. Lady Letitia swayed. "You're saying murder." "I'm saying the orchids disagree with suicide." A clatter of boots announced the arrival of Inspector Craddock from County CID, accompanied by a sergeant lugging a camera. Craddock's moustache bristled with official displeasure. "Miss Marple, I might have known. This is a police matter." "Of course," she replied serenely. "I'm merely a guest admiring the flora." Craddock snorted. "Scene's yours till the photographer's done, then it's sealed." He strode off, barking orders. Miss Marple lingered. She lifted a shard of the broken pot, hand thrown, the clay still bearing the thumbprint of its maker. On the underside, faint charcoal lettering. "Property of T. Finch. Interesting." She slipped the shard into a handbag when no one was looking. Outside, the sky had darkened to the color of bruised plums. Rain began to tap the glass roof like impatient fingers. Miss Marple paused at the threshold, glancing back. The petal in her hand trembled in the draught from the open vent. Somewhere in the tangle of leaves and lies, a thief had graduated to murderer, and the greenhouse itself, Reginald Harrow's cathedral, had become a confessional soaked in blood. As Constable Pork drew the door shut and affixed his seal, Miss Marple caught sight of movement at the far end of the aisle, a flicker of emerald silk vanishing between the palms. She smiled, small and wintry. Luncheon would be served in 40 minutes, plenty of time for the first lie to sprout. She stepped into the rain, parasol blooming like a black poppy, and followed the gravel path toward the manor. Behind her, the greenhouse lights flickered once, then steadied, as though the plants themselves were holding their breath. Chapter 2. Whispers among the wisteria. The dining room at Elderbury Manor smelled of beeswax, roast pheasant, and the particular brand of dread that clings to silver cutlery when murder sits at table. Crystal sconces trembled with each gust against the mullioned windows. Rain lashed the glass like 1,000 tiny accusations. Miss Marple took her place between a porcelain shepherdess and a footman whose knuckles were white on the soup ladle. Lady Letitia presided at the head, cheeks blotched beneath rice powder. To her right sat Evelyn Voss, heiress, horticultural prodigy, and possessor of the emerald silk Miss Marple had glimpsed vanishing through the palms. Evelyn's gown shimmered like beetle wings. Her fingers worried a sprig of stephanotis pinned at the shoulder. Across from her lounged Dr. Peregrine Locke, the visiting botanist, monocle flashing whenever he lifted his glass of claret. His cuffs were immaculate, but a faint green stain, chlorophyll perhaps, marred the left one. Tom Finch, the undergardener, had been relegated to the far end, still in mud-flecked corduroy, eyes fixed on his untouched plate. The final guest, Mrs. Amelia Finch, Tom's aunt and the manor's housekeeper, hovered behind the chairs, refilling glasses with the mechanical precision of a woman who had long ago learned to disappear. Conversation began with the weather and died there. Miss Marple sipped consommé, listening to the silence curdle. At last, Lady Letitia cleared her throat. Reginald's death is inconvenient. The Chelsea judging panel arrives Tuesday. Without the elderberriensis, we forfeit the gold. Evelyn's laugh cracked like a whip. Inconvenient. Aunt, a man's throat was opened with his own shears. I'd call that catastrophic. Language, child, Dr. Locke murmured, though his eyes gleamed. Though I confess, the drama does lend a certain piquancy to the hybrid's absence. Tom Finch's fork clattered. The bloom was cut 2 nights ago. Mr. Harrow blamed me, said I'd sold cuttings to a London dealer. His voice shook with the effort of restraint. I'd sooner burn the glass house than steal from him. Mrs. Finch materialized at his elbow, refilling his glass though it was full. Eat your soup, Tom. You'll need strength for questions. Inspector Craddock entered then, rain dripping from his mackintosh. He declined a chair but accepted coffee. Statements begin in the library at 2. Miss Voss, you discovered the body. Evelyn lifted her chin. I went to fetch Secateurs for the bonsai. The door was unlatched. I thought Reggie overslept. Her gaze slid to Tom. Someone must have lured him early. Or he never left, Miss Marple said quietly. Every head swiveled. She dabbed her lips with damask. The ventilation panes were open. On a chill night, that suggests prolonged work, or an intruder who needed air. Dr. Locke leaned forward. The elderberriensis requires precise humidity, too dry and the petals crisp. Someone knew that. Lady Letitia's rings flashed as she gestured. Reggie kept a ledger, every cross-pollination, every graft. If the thief took that, they took the formula, Evelyn finished. Her voice held something sharper than grief. Father spent a fortune funding the Brazil trip. The patent was to be our legacy. Miss Marple noted the possessive our. Interesting. Pudding arrived, treacle tart, fragrant with lemon zest, but appetites had fled. As plates were cleared, Dr. Locke produced a silver cigarette case engraved with orchids. He offered it around. Only Evelyn accepted. The flare of his lighter illuminated the scar that ran from his left ear to collarbone. Souvenir, perhaps, of some jungle misadventure. In the lull, Miss Marple excused herself. The conservatory calls, Lady Letitia's phalaenopsis, are sensitive to drafts. She slipped through the baize door into the corridor, footsteps muffled by Persian runners. The conservatory lay beyond the music room, its glass dome silvered with rain. Inside, the air was warmer, heavy with night blooming Sirius and the ghosts of hothouse rivalries. Moonlight filtered through the dome, striping the tile floor in zebra shadows. A scrap of paper fluttered beneath a workbench, torn from a ledger, edges singed as though rescued from a fire. Miss Marple knelt, skirts pooling like spilled cream. The fragment listed dates and sums: 500 EV 311 200 TF 511 1000 PL 1011 blackmail or investment. She tucked it into her reticule beside the pottery shard. Footsteps approached, soft, deliberate. Evelyn Voss stepped from behind a stand of bird of paradise, cigarette glowing like a firefly. Snooping, Miss Marple? Admiring, Miss Marple corrected. Your stephanotis is exquisite, though I wonder why you wear it when the scent clashes with Sirius. Evelyn's smile was thin. Reggie bred it for me, said it matched my eyes. She crushed the cigarette beneath her heel. He also said Father's expedition stole the original Catalea from a tribal shrine, that the curse would follow the bloom. Superstition, Miss Marple said, but her pulse quickened. Curses were convenient cloaks for greed. From the corridor came the crash of breaking china. Both women turned as Tom Finch burst in, face streaked with tears and fury. In his fist he brandished a blood-stained glove, kid leather, monogrammed EV in crimson thread. Found this in the compost heap, he shouted. You killed him, Evie, for the patent, for the money. Evelyn recoiled. That's absurd. I was in the library until dawn, cataloguing slides. Miss Marple stepped between them. Mr. Finch, gloves are easily planted, though I confess, the blood is fresh. Curious, for a garment buried since morning. Inspector Craddock appeared in the doorway, flanked by constables. Finch, you'll come quietly, and Miss Voss, library now. As Tom was led away, still protesting, Evelyn's composure cracked. She pressed a hand to her mouth, stephanotis trembling against her throat. Miss Marple caught the scent. Jasmine, yes, but beneath it something acrid. Cyanide? No, too theatrical. But the glove's monogram matched the Secateurs' scratched initials. EV, Evelyn Voss, or someone clever enough to frame her. Later, in the hush of her guest room, Miss Marple laid her treasures on the counterpane. The ledger scrap, the pottery shard, the Catalea petal now pressed between pages of her prayer book. Rain drummed the leaded windows like Morse code. Somewhere in the manor, a clock chimed midnight. She opened her diary and wrote in her neat, slanted hand, Suspect 1, Evelyn, motive patent, opportunity dawn walk. Suspect 2, Tom, jealousy, access to tools, glove planted. Suspect 3, Dr. Locke, scar, stain, 1,000 payment. Question, who benefits if the bloom is never found? A soft knock. Mrs. Finch entered with hot milk, eyes red-rimmed. Tom's a good boy, miss. He'd never. Miss Marple took the cup. Tell me, Mrs. Finch, did Mr. Harrow keep night blooming cereus in the propagating house? The housekeeper blinked. Aye, opens only after moonrise. Beautiful, but the scent turns sickly by dawn. Like secrets, Miss Marple said. They smell sweetest just before they rot. Alone again, she sipped the milk. Sweet, no trace of bitterness, and listened to the manor settle. Floorboards creaked overhead. A door closed with the finality of a coffin lid. Somewhere, a key turned in a lock that had no business being locked. She slipped the diary beneath her pillow, blew out the candle, and lay in the dark, eyes open. Outside, the wisteria tapped the window pane. Tap, 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 like a conspirator begging entry. Miss Marple smiled into the shadows. Tomorrow the lies would ripen. Tonight she would dream of orchids and the precise angle of a blade across a willing throat. Chapter 3. Pruned secrets and tangled vines. Morning crept into Elderberry Manor like a thief wearing borrowed slippers, pale, apologetic, and late. Miss Marple descended the main staircase at 7:30 sharp, the grandfather clock in the hall still coughing from its midnight exertions. A smell of damp plaster and yesterday's blood clung to the air. Somewhere a maid was crying behind the pantry door. She found the household already fractured. Lady Letitia had taken to her boudoir with sal volatile and a hot water bottle shaped like a pug. Inspector Craddock prowled the breakfast room. Toast soldiers lined up like tiny sentries beside his plate. Tom Finch sat handcuffed to a chair in the butler's pantry, watched by a constable whose moustache drooped in sympathy. Evelyn Voss had vanished, her bedroom door ajar, bed unslept in, stephanotis crushed on the windowsill as though someone had ground it underfoot in haste. Dr. Peregrine Locke alone appeared unmoved. He stood at the French windows, coffee cup balanced on saucer, watching rain drip from the yew hedge. When Miss Marple entered, he inclined his head with the courtesy of a duellist, acknowledging a second. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Like a top," she replied, "though I confess the mattress is lumpy with questions." He smiled, scar whitening. "Reggie's archives may smooth them. I've persuaded her ladyship to open the muniments room. Care to join me?" The muniments room lay behind the library, a narrow chamber panelled in worm-eaten oak and lit by a single clerestory window filmed with cobwebs. Dust motes drifted like slow-motion snow. Ledgers marched along shelves in regimented green and crimson, each spine labelled in Reginald Harrow's copperplate. Crosses, 1899, 1914. Graphs, 1915, 1928. Expeditions, 1929, 1952. Dr. Locke pulled down the final volume. The leather cracked like old skin. Inside, pressed between pages, lay a photograph. A younger Harrow in pith helmet, arm around a dark-haired man whose face had been scratched out with a penknife. On the reverse, in faded ink, Rio Negro, 1932. Curse the thief. Miss Marple's fingers tingled. The Brazilian expedition. Indeed. Locke turned pages. Harrow believed the Elderberriensis descended from a sacred orchid guarded by the Yanomami. The tribe's shaman warned that any cutting taken without payment would demand blood in return. Convenient mythology for a man who wished to keep rivals at bay. Locke's monocle glinted. Or for one who needed a scapegoat. A soft scrape sounded behind the panelling. Miss Marple pressed her ear to the oak. Muffled voices, female, urgent. She traced the sound to a section of wainscot that gave beneath her palm. A concealed door swung inward on oiled hinges, revealing a spiral stair descending into gloom. "Servant's passage," Locke murmured. Reggie used it to move specimens unseen. They descended. The air grew warmer, redolent of leaf mold and something sharper. Formalin, perhaps. At the bottom, a brick corridor stretched left toward the kitchens, right toward the kitchen garden. A single bulb flickered, illuminating a door marked Propagating House. Private. The lock had been forced, splinters bright as bone. Inside, chaos reigned. Trays of seedlings lay overturned, compost spilling like entrails. On the central bench sat a glass cloche, shattered. Beneath it, the withered remains of a cattleya keel, its throat the exact cerise of the petal Miss Marple carried. A label in Harrow's hand read, Clone 7, EV gift. Footprints, small, healed, led to a sink where a syringe lay discarded, plunger depressed. Beside it, a vial labeled phytoxin, 5% sol. The liquid inside glowed faint emerald. Poison? Locke asked. Growth regulator, Miss Marple corrected. In concentrated form, lethal to orchids and careless humans. She lifted the syringe with her handkerchief. The needle bore a bead of dried blood. A gasp from the doorway. Mrs. Finch stood there, apron clutched in floury hands. I came for mint. The door was open. Your nephew's initials on the pot shard, Miss Marple said gently. Your footprints in the greenhouse blood. Explain. The housekeeper's knees buckled. She sank onto an upturned crate. Tom found letters, forged in Evie's hand, offering the hybrid to a Dutch consortium. He showed Reggie. They argued. Reggie said he'd expose her at Chelsea, ruin the Voss name. Tears carved channels through the flour on her cheeks. I only wanted to protect the boy. I hid the letters in the compost, burned the envelopes, but the glove was planted, Miss Marple finished, by someone who knew Tom's temper. Dr. Locke knelt, examining the cloche shards. These fractures are fresh. Someone destroyed the clone after the murder to ensure no rival blooms surfaced. A bell clanged overhead. 3 urgent peals. Craddock's voice echoed down the stair. Miss Marple, potting shed, now. They ran. The potting shed crouched behind the peach wall. Door splintered inward. Inside, Constable Park wrestled with a writhing figure in mud-stained overalls. Evelyn Voss, hair wild, cheeks scratched by brambles. On the floor lay an open trunk. Inside, bundles of 50 notes, a passport in the name Elaine Vine, and a one-way ticket to Buenos Aires dated tomorrow. Evelyn spat soil. I was retrieving what's mine. Reggie stole the formula from Father's notes. Craddock snapped cuffs. You'll explain at the station. But Miss Marple's gaze fixed on the trunk's false bottom, pried loose. Beneath lay a second ledger, smaller, bound in red morocco. She opened it, page after page of meticulous entries. EV, 500 silencery, Rio theft. TF, 200 hushry, Chelsea sabotage 1948. PL, 1,000 return of Schauman's relic. Blackmail systematized. Evelyn laughed, bitter. He bled us all. I came to pay one last installment and found him already dead. Convenient, Craddock growled. Miss Marple lifted a page. The ink on the final entry was still tacky. 11:11, final reckoning. Orchid returns to earth. Beneath, a charcoal sketch of secateurs crossed with a vine. Locke's scar twitched. Reggie's handwriting, but the pressure is wrong. Someone forged the confession. Thunder rolled overhead. Rain hammered the corrugated roof like thrown gravel. In the storm's electric pause, Miss Marple heard it. The greenhouse ventilator creaking open, though no wind stirred the leaves. She stepped outside. Lightning forked, illuminating the glass house 100 yards away. For an instant, a silhouette stood among the orchids, tall, motionless, holding something that glinted like steel. Then darkness swallowed it. Craddock followed her gaze. Ghost. Or unfinished business, she said. Back in the shed, she confronted Evelyn. You wore emerald silk last night. Yet the glove found in the compost was kid leather, monogrammed. Whose wardrobe did you raid? Evelyn's defiance cracked. Aunt Letitia's. She keeps theatrical costumes from her touring days. I thought to frame Tom. He's always coveted my place. Mrs. Finch sobbed. My boy's no killer. No, Miss Marple agreed, but someone counted on his rage. She turned to Locke. Doctor, your payment was largest. What relic did Harrow return? Locke's monocle slipped. He caught it. Expression unreadable. A dried orchid press. Yanomami sacred. I bought it in good faith. Yet it vanished from the British Museum last year. Miss Marple's voice was soft steel. Curious coincidence. The storm broke fully then, water cascading from gutters in silver sheets. Craddock ordered the shed sealed. As constables marched Evelyn away, Miss Marple lingered, rain soaking her cardigan. She lifted the red ledger, shielding it beneath her arm. In the margin of the final page, almost invisible, someone had penciled coordinates. 51.73, Whodunit, 01234 W, the rosebed behind the sundial. She smiled, small and dangerous. Roots went deep at Elderberry Manor, and some secrets were buried alive. Chapter 4. The Thorn in the Rosebed. The storm had spent itself by tea time, leaving the gardens sodden and shining, every leaf rinsed to a jewel bright gleam. Miss Marple stood on the terrace in borrowed galoshes, surveying the wreckage. A toppled urn, petals plastered to the flagstones like wet confetti. The sundial's shadow pointed accusingly at 4 o'clock, though the sky still wore the bruised palette of late afternoon. Inspector Craddock joined her, mackintosh unbuttoned, hair plastered to his skull. We've searched the rosebed. Nothing but worms and a rusted trowel. He sounded almost relieved. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed on the coordinates again. 51.73. Galana N. 0.1234 Degraing W. The sundial itself, she murmured. Reginald was literal. The relic is beneath the gnomon. Craddock barked orders. 2 constables fetched spades. The sundial, a bronze disc the width of a cartwheel, sat on a pedestal of weathered Portland stone. Beneath the disc, the soil had been disturbed recently. Dark crumbs clung to the grass like dried blood. They dug. 6 inches down, the blade struck metal. A tin box, army surplus, stenciled RH 1944. Inside, a pressed orchid, petals blackened with age, wrapped in oilskin. A tag in Portuguese, Flor Sagrada, Devolvum Humorum, return or die. Dr. Locke arrived as the box was lifted, face pale beneath the scar. That's the Yanomami relic. Museum thought it lost in the Blitz. Convenient, Miss Marple said, though I suspect the Blitz was merely the first lie. Lady Letitia appeared on the terrace steps, leaning on Mrs. Finch's arm. Reggie kept souvenirs, she called, voice trembling. He never spoke of curses. Yet someone believed them enough to kill, Miss Marple replied. She turned to Craddock. We require a reenactment tonight in the greenhouse. Full moon rises at 9:30. The Sirius will open. The stage will be set. Craddock opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. He had learned, over the years, that Miss Marple's whims were rarely whimsical. Dusk painted the glass house violet. Workmen had swept the blood, replaced the shattered pot, and restored the orchid bench to pristine order. New cattleyas, hothouse cousins, stood in serried ranks, their throats glowing like tiny lanterns. The ventilation panes were wedged open exactly 6 inches, as they had been at dawn. The suspects assembled at 9:15. Summoned by handwritten notes sealed with green wax. Evelyn Voss, released on bail, wore mourning black that made her skin translucent. Tom Finch stood beside his aunt, wrists raw from cuffs. Dr. Locke adjusted his monocle with theatrical calm. Lady Letitia clutched a vinaigrette as though it were a grenade. Miss Marple took centre stage beneath the hanging Tillandsias. "We shall recreate Mr. Harrow's final hour," she announced. "Each of you will play your part as memory or conscience dictates." She assigned positions with the precision of a choreographer. Tom at the potting bench, Evelyn near the Vander baskets, Locke by the propagation door. Lady Letitia was given a chair and instructed to observe. Mrs. Finch hovered with a tray of secateurs, identical to the murder weapon, blades polished to surgical brilliance. 6 o'clock, Miss Marple intoned. Reginald enters to check humidity. Tom moved to the gauge, mimicking a routine older than his employment. He notices the elderberriensis missing from its cloche. Anger, perhaps fear. Evelyn stepped forward. "He accused me, said I'd sold the formula to pay gambling debts." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Debts." Craddock's eyebrows rose. "Father's legacy squandered on roulette at Deauville," Evelyn admitted. "Reggie held the IOUs." Locke lit a cigarette, the flare illuminating the scar. "He held more than paper. He held reputations." Miss Marple raised a hand. 6:30. Someone joins him. She nodded to Locke, who crossed to the orchid bench, picking up secateurs. "You argued about the relic. You demanded its return." Locke's laugh was soft. He laughed harder, said the museum could rot. Tom moved instinctively, as though to intervene. Mrs. Finch caught his sleeve. "Steady, lad." 9:40, Miss Marple continued. "The Sirius begins to open." As if on cue, the first white petal unfurled, releasing a perfume thick as syrup. Reginald kneels to adjust the heater. Vulnerable. She produced the twin secateurs, the pair found in the potting shed trunk, blade nicked identically. These were kept in the propagating house. Someone fetched them after the murder to replace the weapon and confuse the trail. Evelyn's breath hitched. "I told you, I was framing Tom." "No," Miss Marple interrupted. "You were being framed." She turned to Lady Letitia. "Madam, your theatrical gloves, kid leather, monogrammed EV, were taken from the costume trunk. Your handwriting forged. The Buenos Aires ticket. Why?" Lady Letitia's vinaigrette clattered to the floor. I wished to protect the manor. Evelyn's scandals would ruin us." "Scandals you invented," Miss Marple said gently. "The gambling, the Dutch consortium, all to divert suspicion from the true motive." She stepped to the rose-bed coordinates, now marked by a constable's chalk cross. "The relic was never the prize. It was the distraction. The elder Brilliance's patent is worth thousands, enough to save a crumbling estate, but only if the creator's death appeared unrelated to greed." Tom Finch's face drained of colour. "You're saying Mr. Harrow was killed for money?" "For inheritance," Miss Marple corrected. "Lady Letitia, your husband's will leaves the gardens and the patent to the Harrow bloodline. Reginald had no children. The nearest heir is—" "Tom," Mrs. Finch whispered. "My sister's boy, Reggie's nephew, though he never acknowledged it." The greenhouse seemed to contract, glass walls pressing inward. Tom shook his head violently. "I didn't know." "But someone did," Miss Marple said. "Someone who forged your initials on the pot, planted the glove, destroyed the clone. Someone who needed you convicted swiftly before the will was read." She faced Dr. Locke. "You arrived last week with a letter from the Royal Horticultural Society. Forged, I suspect, on stationery stolen from their London office. Your scar is theatrical latex, the chlorophyll stain, common alga. You are no botanist, doctor. You're a confidence trickster with a penchant for exotic disguises." Locke's monocle fell, shattering on the slate. "Preposterous." Is it? Miss Marple produced the red ledger. Your real name is Percival Locke, disgraced curator, sacked for embezzlement. You partnered with Lady Letitia to stage the theft, the murder, the frame. The relic was your flourish, Yanomami superstition to terrify the household into silence. Lady Letitia swayed. I only wanted the estate saved. Reggie refused to sell the patent. He said the orchid was his child. So you pruned the gardener, Miss Marple finished, and cultivated a scapegoat. Lightning, residual, belated, flashed outside, illuminating the scene in stark monochrome. Craddock moved forward, cuffs ready. Locke bolted, but Tom Finch, freed of suspicion, tripped him with a rake. The false botanist sprawled among the ferns, cursing in fluent Portuguese. As constables hauled him upright, Miss Marple knelt by the Sirius. Its bloom was fully open now, luminous against the dark. She touched a petal. Nature abhors a vacuum. So does justice. Lady Letitia sank to the bench, bombazine pooling like spilled ink. The will changes nothing. The gardens will be sold for death duties. Perhaps, Miss Marple said, but Tom inherits the patent, a lad who knows every vein in every leaf. He will tend them honestly. Evelyn approached, eyes dry. I hated Reggie for his greed, but I never wished him dead. Miss Marple patted her hand. Greed kills slowly. Desperation strikes once. Outside, the moon sailed clear of the clouds, silvering the glass house roof. The Sirius began to close, petals folding like a secret kept. Miss Marple gathered her reticule, the ledger, the relic, the broken monocle, and walked into the night. Behind her, the greenhouse lights dimmed, one by one, until only the moon remained to witness the pruning of a poisonous dynasty. Chapter 5. The Final Bloom of Justice. Sunlight poured through the conservatory's fanlight the next morning, turning the air into molten glass. Palms cast fronds like green cathedral arches. The scent of damp earth and orange blossom drifted from newly opened buds. Elderbury Manor's conservatory, usually reserved for winter camellias and Lady Letitia's nervous breakdowns, had been transformed into a courtroom of velvet and verdigris. A mahogany table, borrowed from the dining room, stood at the center, flanked by 6 ladder-back chairs. A single vase of white cattleyas, Tom Finch's own crosses, occupied pride of place, their throats the exact cerise of the vanished hybrid. Miss Marple entered at 11 precisely, cardigan buttoned to the throat despite the warmth. In her hands she carried a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with gardener's twine. Inspector Craddock followed, notebook open, pen poised like a stinger. Behind them came the accused, Lady Letitia, upright but hollow-eyed, supported by Mrs. Finch. Percival Locke, monocle gone, scar peeling at the edges, flanked by 2 constables. Evelyn Voss, black veil lifted, expression unreadable. Tom Finch, hair combed for the first time in days, clutching a folded document. Craddock cleared his throat. This is informal, Miss Marple. No magistrate, no jury. But the chief constable wants clarity before charges are filed. Clarity, Miss Marple echoed, is what orchids demand. Light, air, truth. She placed the parcel on the table and untied the twine. Inside lay the red ledger, the tin box with its cursed bloom, the forged RHS letter, and, newly added, a single sheet of heavy cream notepaper sealed in wax the color of dried blood. She addressed the room. Yesterday's reenactment pruned the obvious branches. Today we expose the root. Lady Letitia's voice quavered. I've confessed to the forgery, the glove, the ticket. Percival acted on my instructions. It was desperation, not murder. Desperation is a slow poison, Miss Marple replied. Murder is the blade. She turned to Locke. You arrived with a letter dated 8th November, postmarked London. Yet the RHS stationery was printed in September, new watermark, easily verified. You stole it during a lecture on epiphytic nutrition. Your scar is spirit gum and grease paint. The Yanomami relic, a pressed specimen from Q's own glass house, dyed with logwood to simulate age. Locke's smirk faltered. Circumstantial. Indeed, Miss Marple said, until we consider the secateurs. She produced the murder weapon, now wrapped in oilcloth, and his twin from the potting shed trunk. Both pairs engraved RH 1923, both nicked at the pivot. But observe the bevel. She held them to the light. The killer's blade is ground left-handed. Reginald was right-handed. The twin, your twin, Mr. Locke, was sharpened to match after the fact, to suggest a pair kept in reserve. Craddock leaned closer. So the killer brought his own weapon. Precisely, and left Reginald clutching the original, staging suicide. Evelyn stepped forward. Then Letitia ordered the frame, but who swung the blade? Miss Marple unfolded the cream notepaper. This arrived by village post an hour ago, addressed to me. The handwriting matches the forged ledger entry. She read aloud. The orchid returns to earth. So does the thief. Meet me at the sundial, midnight, or the boy hangs for my sin. Signed, R.H. Tom Finch paled. He's alive? No, Miss Marple said softly, but his conscience is. She turned to Mrs. Finch. You wrote this. You forged the confession to draw the killer out, believing Tom would be freed by doubt. But the coordinates were yours, dug up years ago when you buried a locket for your sister's grave. You knew the soil's memory. The housekeeper sank into a chair, apron twisting in her lap. Reggie was my brother-in-law. He acknowledged Tom in secret, left him the patent in a codicil witnessed by Dr. Moss. When Letitia schemed to sell the gardens, Reggie refused. She hired Locke to frighten him, steal the bloom, stage a curse, but Locke saw profit in blood. Locke lunged, but constables pinned him. Lies. She promised half the patent. Silence, Craddock snapped. He faced Lady Letitia. You admit conspiracy to defraud. She nodded, tears carving channels through powder. I never meant death, only ruin. Miss Marple lifted the tin box. The relic was bait. Locke killed Reginald to silence him, then planted evidence to frame Tom, knowing the codicil would surface at probate, leaving the patent to a convicted murderer, thus forfeit to the estate. You, Lady Letitia, would sell to the Dutch consortium, split the proceeds. Evelyn's voice cut like frost. And I was the perfect scapegoat. Debts, temper, emerald silk. Silk you wore at my suggestion, Lady Letitia whispered. I said it brought out your eyes. Tom Finch stepped forward, document trembling in his hand. The codicil's witnessed. Dr. Moss confirmed it this morning. The patent's mine, free and clear. His gaze swept the room, settling on Miss Marple. I'll breed the elderberryensis again. Honest crosses, no curses. Miss Marple smiled. A gardener's redemption. She opened the red ledger to a fresh page and wrote in her neat slant, case closed. Motive, greed masked as legacy. Killer, Percival Locke, hired blade. Accomplice, Lady Letitia Harrow, architect of deceit. Justice, patent to rightful heir. Gardens preserved, lies composted. Craddock closed his notebook. Charges, murder for Locke, conspiracy for her ladyship. The rest walk free. As constables led Locke away, he twisted for a final sneer. The orchid was cursed, you'll see. Miss Marple lifted the white cattleya from the vase. Curses wither without belief. She tucked the bloom behind Tom's ear, a coronation of petals. Tend them well. Outside, the garden steamed in the sun. Workmen had already begun repairs. New glass for the shattered pane, fresh compost for the orchid bench. Mrs. Finch walked with Tom toward the greenhouse, his arm around her shoulders, family at last acknowledged. Evelyn lingered on the terrace. I thought inheritance was a chain. Turns out it was a noose. Choose your chains lightly, Miss Marple advised, or plant roses instead. Lady Letitia was escorted to the Daimler, veil lowered, future uncertain. The manor would pass to distant cousins, the title would sleep, but the gardens would flourish under hands that knew every secret of root and rhizome. Miss Marple boarded the return train at 3:30, African violets restored to her basket. As chipping elderberry receded, she opened her diary to a blank page and wrote, "Murder by Secateurs, a tale of pruning gone cruel. Yet from the wound, new growth. Tom will breed 1,000 elderberrienses, each bloom a testament that truth, like compost, enriches what it touches." She closed the book, adjusted her hat, and watched the countryside unroll in verdant waves. Somewhere behind her, a greenhouse door stood open to the breeze, and the scent of honest orchids drifted on the wind. Sweet, untainted, eternal.